Welcome to episode 61 of the Henry George Daily Devotional. This is our 13th week. We start here in Book 6, The Remedy, Chapter 1, Insufficiency of Remedies Currently Advocated, and we are considering the third advocated remedy that is insufficient. It is titled by George, From Combinations of Workmen. Yeah, I'm guessing this just means something like people need to work together better, more efficiently, and that will be the remedy for depressions. One comment is like even if there weren't depressions and recessions, like somehow you just didn't have more and more people speculating causing another depression, and there were just a steady state of some amount of speculation, that still would not be a just society. It would not be good. It could be better. It could be fixed. More justice could be provided through the remedy that George will eventually give us, I believe. George writes, "It is evident from the laws of distribution, as previously traced, that combinations of workmen can advance wages, uh, and this not at the expense of other workmen, as is sometimes said, nor yet at the expense of capital, as is generally believed, but ultimately at the expense of rent. That no general advance in wages can be secured by combination, that any advance in particular wages thus secured must reduce other wages, or the profits of capital, or both, are ideas that spring from the erroneous notion that wages are drawn from capital." I guess I wonder sometimes when I'm reading this if I should go and it's like, oh yeah, this is what we read like 3 or 4 weeks ago. Do you remember? And then it's like, oh, should we go back and reread all that? Or do we just keep going? Anyway, we'll just keep going. The, the fallacy of these ideas is demonstrated not alone by the laws of distribution as we have worked them out, but by experience so far as it has gone. The advance of wages in particular trades by combinations of workmen, of which there are many examples, has nowhere shown any effect in lowering wages in other trades or in reducing the rate of profits. Okay, we accept this. I accept this, that some wages going up in for some trades doesn't seem to lower wages in other trades. Except, oh, we accepted it, but now we're saying except as it may affect his fixed capital or current engagements, a diminution of wages can benefit, and an increase of wages can injure an employer only insofar as it gives him an advantage or puts him at a disadvantage as compared with other employers. Okay, so this exception is not referencing his previous sentence or anything. It's going to reference the subject he's going to mention in a moment, which is the employer. So sometimes combination of workmen might affect the employer, or a diminution of wages can benefit, and an increase of wages can injure. Yes. Either one could affect the employer. The employer who first succeeds in reducing the wages of his hands, or is first compelled to pay an advance, gains an advantage, or is put at a disadvantage in regard to his competitors, which ceases when the movement includes them also. So far, however, as the change in wages affects his contracts or stocks on, I think this is supposed to be on hand, stocks on band. By changing the relative cost of production, it may be to him a real gain or loss, though this gain or loss, being purely relative, disappears when the whole community is considered. And if the change in wages works a change in relative demand, It may render capital fixed in machinery, buildings, or otherwise more or less profitable, but in this a new equilibrium is soon reached, for especially in a progressive country, fixed capital is only somewhat less more mobile than circulating capital. If there is too little in a certain form, the tendency of capital to assume that form soon brings it up to the required amount. If there is too much, the cessation of increment soon restores the level. This makes me think of my upcoming writings on uh, capital and interest in response to the Gassellian view of interest, that capital changing forms is significant and advantageous to society would be a premise when I'm arguing for justification or explanation of why there exists interest, the return to capital, even when it is in the form of a wasting away capital good versus a form of capital that benefits from the reproductive forces of nature. That's a little tangential, um, but I wanted to talk about it. Yeah, this whole category, combination of workmen, I don't find that a very, like, it doesn't prima facie argument to even tempt me to think that that will fix economic troubles. Oh, we just got to get better at making things or working. We got to just work together better. Like, you, I don't know. I feel like if there are cases when two people won't work together and it's against their economic interest to do so, and they don't do it because they hate each other or something. But on the whole, I think that people will work together if it means making more wealth. Of course, a lot of people are going to say, you know, rich white men, they're not going to work with black people or women, uh, even against their own financial interests, and they're doing this out of, you know, bad morality or something. Uh, and they say they they've witnessed this, they've seen this, and maybe I don't know. I don't work in corporate America. Uh, I played soccer. That's one of my biggest team experiences, and soccer is pretty clearly meritocracy. Mm, Definitely the social aspect is not, like who's going to be friends with whom afterwards or what team you're going to join on. Um, and there are small little, yeah, I don't know. But I would say on the whole, when you're really good, teams will want you. So working together is high in that world is is takes precedence over most little bigotries. So anyway, this is why I don't find, not that George is even talking about that kind of combination of workmen or like that as he's not even talking about it as an obstacle to cooperation or combination of workmen. But anyway, George continues, while most of the objections made to the combination of workmen for the advance of wages are thus baseless, while the success of such combinations cannot reduce other wages or decrease the profits of capital or injuriously affect national prosperity, okay, yet so great are the difficulties in the way of the effective combination of laborers. I see. So there's this presumption that right now there's a lot of difficulties preventing effective combinations. And that may be so in George's time. That is likely so in our time with so much regulation. Just doesn't, yeah. So I guess, I guess there are probably a lot of, libertarianish people who think that the reason why we're having these depressions and recessions these days is because of all this inhibiting regulation. We don't have the free market and so on. And I would agree that we have a lot of very inefficient regulation, and some of it's not simply inefficient, but actually provides perverse incentives, um, and like doing us like active harm. It's like worse. It's worse that they exist than they. Yeah. Well, of course it's worse if they're inhibiting um, or inefficient in some way, but they don't even like trade off for the goods they think they're trading off for, like a lot of inspection and inspection and stuff, or credentialism. That's my opinion. So I could see that that's why some people are now saying we're not able to work efficiently, and that's we need to get the government out of the business, and that's why maybe that's what he's meaning. The difficulties in the way, but let's just read what George says. Uh, these difficulties that the good can be accomplished by them is extremely limited, while there are inherent disadvantages in the process. To raise wages in a particular occupation or occupations, which is all that any combination of workmen yet made, has been equal to attempting, is manifestly a task the difficulty of which progressively increases. Yes, to raise wages in a particular occupation, um, which is all that any combination of workmen yet made has been equal to attempting. So he's saying the only reason people combine is to try to raise their wages, is a difficulty, and it gets harder and harder. Okay. For the higher are wages of any particular kind raised above their normal level with other wages, the stronger are the tendencies to bring them back. I guess this is going to be something like if all your if some if the lawn mowing companies around you suddenly figure out how to like do things really more efficiently by combining better, and this way they're making more money. As soon as that gets out that, there's this new technique where you can mow a whole ton of yards with only one, I don't know, cool new trick. Like there's this cool way of like you can push two lawnmowers at once. Once it gets out that all these lawnmowers are making crazy amounts of money, a bunch of people are going to go into lawn mowing, I guess. Maybe. No, I don't think that's what he's saying. He's just saying whatever the tendencies are to bring them. So let's see. Thus, if a printers union by a successful or threatened strike raise the wages of types, oh, maybe he's just talking about collective bargaining. So like, yes, the unions. Um, this is, yeah, I'll have to share this with some of the video game development people I know who are pretty pro-union. I'm not anti-union, I just don't think that they get at the root cause. Thus, if a printers union by a successful or threatened strike raise the wages of typesetting 10% above the normal rate as compared with other wages, relative demand and supply are at once affected. On the one hand, there's a tendency to a diminution of the amount of typesetting called for. Yeah, okay, because it's costing the printers more, so they'll look to find other ways, I guess, or doing less of it. I don't know. Um, and on the other, the higher rate of wages tends to increase the number of compositors in ways the strongest combination cannot altogether prevent. Um, so you see then why a union or something would both demand higher wages and then try to prevent people from flooding into the industry as they got these higher wages. I wonder what's going on right now. Um, with the current raise in that must be happening, right? There's a new minimum wage in California for fast food workers, $20 an hour, and and coffee shops don't fall into this category yet. I was talking to a coffee shop owner, and he says he has to like pay $20 an hour to be competitive to hire those people. And I know a 20-year-old kid who is has applied like 30 or 40 or he sent his application out online 30 or 40 times. He's gone into like half a dozen or more, I don't know, stores trying to get one of these jobs, and he can't do it. So everyone's flooding in. You could say that the minimum wage going up was an act of collective bargaining by the voters, and now um, people are now sort of flooding to that industry as it's being like relatively high overcompensated. I wouldn't say it's truly being overcompensated. I think that all of our wages are undercompensated due to land monopoly. As a general statement about wages, those who make money off of land monopoly, or yeah. Anyway, um, yeah. So the diminution of typesetting called for on the interwires tends to increase the number of compositors, so everyone starts becoming a compositor. If the increase be 20%, uh, so we are presuming a 10% increase. Now, if it's a 20% increase, these tendencies are much stronger. Or if it is 50%, they become stronger still, and so on. So that practically even, so that practically even in countries like England, where the lines between different trades are much more distinct and difficult to pass than in countries like the United States, that which trades unions, even when supporting each other, can do in the way of raising wages is comparatively little, and this little, moreover, is confined to their own sphere and does not affect the lower stratum of unorganized laborers. Okay. I've misunderstood this like whole category. I mean, I sort of realized that when we started talking about unions here. Combination of workmen, I guess this whole category is about unions, not about specialization or division of labor. You may have figured that out a lot sooner than I did. You may not have figured it out a lot sooner than I did. I may have led you down my incorrect path. All right, so the unorganized laborers are not benefited. Whose condition most needs alleviation? Yes, the bottom of the rung. And ultimately determines that of all above them. Yes, because the only reason all of the non-landed class gets paid anything is to simply keep them alive. And then the only reason people get paid more than that wage is to persuade some more capable forms of labor to do other kinds of jobs rather than that base rate. And so that's why we've already covered all this. Go back to episodes, 0 to 60. We are now at episode 61. The only way by which wages could be raised to any extent and with any permanence by this method would be by a general combination such as was aimed at by the internationals, which should include laborers of all kinds, federal minimum wage. But such a combination may be set down as practically impossible, for the difficulties of combination, great enough in the most highly paid and smallest trades, become greater and greater as we descend in the industrial scale. Hmm. I don't know. I first thought this is kind of like I could see that being the case of it's very difficult to coordinate all workers everywhere and trade unions everywhere. But if you just have the federal government do it, I feel like some of these difficulties do go away. But you do end up with if we were all to raise the wage, like if there were federal law that all like a minimum wage of $100, then suddenly all the jobs now, I don't know. There's so much writing about this stuff that I've already been persuaded of. All the jobs between like 20 and 100 would suddenly uh, have to compete with this new $100 wage. Many of the things that we would prefer to be made would no longer be made or not as much made of. People would find different kinds of um, Like labor and capital would shift into different forms that would probably reduce the amount of labor required, and there'd be more reliance on capital, so there'd be fewer actual jobs available. Um, there would be an attempt at raising the prices of the goods. The price of goods would go up, and of course, also the landlords would effectively raise rent and collect back a lot of that money. Anyway, let's just keep going and see what George has to say. Nor, in the struggle of endurance, which is the only method which combinations not to work for less than a certain minimum have of effecting the increase of wages, must it be forgotten who are the real parties pitted against each other. Okay, this is quite a sentence. Uh, so in the struggle of endurance, we must not forget who are the real parties pitted against each other. It is not labor and capital, it is laborers on the one side and the owners of land on the other. If the contest were between labor and capital, it would be on much more equal terms, for the power of capital to stand out is only some little greater than that of labor. I don't know what he means by to stand out. Capital not only ceases to earn anything when not used, but it goes to waste. For in nearly all its forms it can be maintained only by constant reproduction. Alright, well, George, what about your favorite form of capital interest that justifies interest? The capital that um, benefits from the reproductive forces of nature. Although, of course, all of those forms of capital that benefit from the reproductive forces of nature do require some form of maintenance. Like if you have, you know, offspring bearing animals, whatever, reproductive animals, somebody usually has to watch over them, tend them, feed them, guard them. And anyway, but land, so yes, I see. So yes, land and labor, both when they're out of work, laborers starve to death, capital goes to waste in most cases, maybe at some part in all cases. But land will not starve like laborers or go to waste like capital. Its owners can wait. They may be inconvenienced. Oh, yeah. It is true, but what is inconvenienced to them is destruction to capital and starvation to labor. The agricultural laborers in certain parts of England are now endeavoring to combine for the purpose of securing an increase in their miserably low wages. If it was capital that was receiving the enormous difference between the real produce of their labor and the pittance they got out of it, they would have but to make an effective combination to secure success. Yeah, sometimes I think about this like if I own the farm and I have 100 ranch hands, I own the ranch, 100 ranch hands, and they all band together and say, we refuse to work until you pay us more. I could just be like, all right, well, all you guys go home, I'm not paying you more. And instead of making the millions I was going to be making off of them, I now just go work, by myself. A bunch of my horses and a bunch of my wheat all dies or rots or whatever. But there's a level at which I can just work each day on my land and make some wealth to sustain me and maybe increase in wealth. While those 100 laborers, they have no access to any other land. They just are going to have to live off their savings, and I can keep producing and living forever, and they'll starve to death. Yeah. All right. George continues, for the farmers who are their direct employers can afford to go without labor, but little, if any, better than laborers can afford to go without wages. But the farmers cannot yield much without a reduction of rent. And thus it is between the land owners and the laborers that the real struggle must come. Suppose the combination to be so thorough as to include all agricultural laborers, and to prevent from doing so all who might be tempted to take their places. The laborers refuse to work, except at a considerable advance of wages. The farmers can give it only by securing a considerable reduction of rent, and have no way to back their demands except as the laborers back theirs, by refusing to go on with production. If cultivation thus come to a deadlock, the landowners would lose only their rent, while the land improved by lying fallow, but the laborers would starve. Yes, this is the example I was sort of anticipating. And if English laborers of all kind were united in one grand league for a general increase of wages, the real contest would be the same and under the same conditions. For wages could not be increased except to the decrease of rent, and in a general deadlock, landowners could live while laborers of all sorts must starve or emigrate. The owners of the land of England are by virtue of their ownership the masters of England. So true is it that to whomsoever the soil at any time belongs, to him belongs the fruit of it. Let me get that tattooed. That's the Brahmin's quote, I think. The white parasols and the elephants mad with pride passed with the grant of English land, and the people at large can never regain their power until that grant is resumed. What is true of England is universally true. It may be said that such a deadlock in production could never occur. This is true, but true only because no such thorough combination of labor as might produce it is possible. But the fixed and definite nature of land enables landowners to combine much more easily and efficiently than either laborers or capitalists. Yeah, this term capitalist in his time is kind of funny. It's just, I guess, people who own stuff but not land, but you got to think that he's using it as this weird middle distinction because generally you would think there's a tendency of those who own land are also coincidentally uh, the ones who own a lot of capital. And that's one of the big problems with all of our economics the past 150 years or more or forever is the conflation of land and capital and treating land as a form of capital. And so when we currently yell about these horrible capitalists or something, we are thinking of these people who own land and capital. Georgist capital necessarily excludes land. Please refer to episodes 1 through, I don't remember, 6. Um, how easy and efficient that combination is, there are many historical examples, and the absolute necessity for the use of land, and the certainty in all progressive countries that it must increase in value, produce among landowners without any formal combination all the effects that could be produced by the most rigorous combination among laborers or capitalists. Deprive a laborer of opportunity of employment, and he will soon be anxious to get work on any terms. But when the receding wave of speculation leaves nominal land values clearly above real values, whoever has lived in a growing country knows with what tenacity landowners hold on. And besides, for dear life, and besides these practical difficulties in the plan of forcing by endurance and increasing an increase of wages, there are in such methods inherent disadvantages which working men should not blink. I speak without prejudice, for I am still an honorary member of the Union, which, while working at my trade, I always loyally supported. But see, the methods by which a trade union can alone act are necessarily destructive. Its organization is necessarily tyrannical. A strike, which is the only recourse by which a trade union can enforce its demands, is a destructive contest. Just such a contest as that to which an eccentric called the Money King once, in the early days of San Francisco, challenged a man who had taunted him with meanness, that they should go down to the wharf and alternately toss $20 pieces into the bay until one gave in. Wow. The struggle of endurance involved in a strike is really what it has often been compared to, a war. And like all war, it lessens wealth, and the organization for it must, like the organization for war, be tyrannical. As even the man who would fight for freedom must, when he enters an army, give up his personal freedom and become a mere part in a great machine, so must it be with workmen who organize for a strike. These combinations are therefore necessarily destructive of the very things which workmen seek to gain through them, wealth and freedom. There is an ancient Hindu mode of compelling the payment of a just debt, traces of something akin to which Sir Henry Maine has found in the laws of the Irish Brehons. It is called sitting dharna, the creditor seeking enforcement of his debt by sitting down at the door of the debtor and refusing to eat or drink until he is paid. Like this is the method of labor combinations. In their strikes, trades unions sit dharna, but unlike the Hindu, they have not the power of superstition to back them. That's it.